When you talk to just about any politician or political candidate, and they talk about the issues they're passionate about and things they want to see done, it can seem like every issue they talk about is a priority. But the flip side of it means that nothing is a priority if everything's a priority. At the end of the day, politicians, particularly those in power, have to make choices. What do you do first? What do you marshal political capital for? What's the sequencing? In the case of the Biden administration, it's pretty clear at this point that infrastructure, the total package, both care economy and more traditional infrastructure, that's the priority. They are actively negotiating two separate pieces of legislation around those priorities. The one, the bipartisan deal they struck, one which is going to go through reconciliation. And they want them done now. They've got, a full court press. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer pushing for procedural votes on both of those tracks this week. It now appears that might be delayed, although that's been back and forth. But since infrastructure is happening now and all the energy and the focus and political capital is being spent on it, other legislation, like, for instance, voting rights protection, electoral reform, just is naturally moved further down the line, both in a time sense and a priority sense. Now, that being said, Senate Democrats on the Rules Committee held a field hearing on voting rights in Atlanta, Georgia today. It's the first field hearing in 20 years, and it focused specifically on Georgia's absurdly restrictive new voting law. Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina is the number 3 ranking Democrat in the House. He, of course, endorsed Joe Biden when it seemed like Biden's presidential campaign might be flagging. That endorsement helped him win South Carolina, essentially the nomination after that. He's advocated the president and Senate Democrats work behind the scenes to carve out an exception to the filibuster to pass voting rights protections. And Congressman James Clyburn joins me now. First, I wonder if you agree with my read of the prioritization right now of the legislative agenda of this Democratic administration right now.
Well, I think that you've got it right with chronology. I'm not too sure that you have it right on the subject matter. To me, voting is the top priority whenever we're talking about politics. Now, that doesn't mean that on the calendar it will be voted on first, and that's certainly not the case here. But voting remains a top priority with us. All the other things are secondary if we can't get people to the polls.
Yeah, part of this always comes back to the math in the Senate and reconciliation. I think you've been very, astute and compelling on the idea that there are already carve-outs for different things that can't be filibustered, that this should be in that category. I just wonder if you feel like you've had more conversations or made any progress with that argument to the people that will need to agree with you to get to a resolution.
Well, I think I've made progress with a lot of people. I'm not too sure how much progress I've made with 2 people particularly, and that's the 2 senators who seem to be wedded to the filibuster no matter what. I'm still working with them, and I think I am making progress. We'll see when the time comes.
There was an big announcement in the House today, which is the Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy announcing the 5 members that will serve on that January 6th select committee. It's notable that 3 of those members, including, Jim Jordan, quite notoriously, that Jim Jordan voted along with 3 of those members, 2 other members, voted against Joe Biden electors being seated, voted essentially to overturn the election, in line with what Donald Trump wanted and what the mob wanted. I wonder if you think that vote should be disqualifying to sit on that committee.
Well, personally, I would think so. But politically, I can understand what Kevin McCarthy is doing. I do not agree with it. I think we ought to be serious about this. And I'm not too sure how serious some of those people are about where we are in this country and what we need to do to preserve this democracy for our children and grandchildren. It would be a shame for us to inherit such good, long work that's gone into building this country into what it is today, to allow ourselves to seep into an autocracy, which is what some people seem to want. That's not what this country is all about. And I don't think that we can be serious about preserving it if you don't put people on these committees who are serious about finding out what really happened, why it happened, and what we should do about it.
over the weekend, we observed the anniversary of the passing of John Lewis, of course, your colleague and friend for many years, civil rights icon, who, was at the forefront of the passage of a Voting Rights Act that finally turned America into a true functioning multiracial democracy, really for the first time in its history. How do you think about his legacy at this very perilous and fraught moment as we're fighting over whether we're going to remain a multiracial democracy?
Well, thank you so much for mentioning that. John Lewis and I first met in October 1960. We became fast friends. We had no idea back then that we would end up serving here in Congress together. But throughout those years, on voter education, John Lewis ran the voter education project for the entire southern region when I was doing the same thing down in Charleston. So voting is very, very important to us. Now, I never made the kind of sacrifices that John made. I practiced nonviolence. John internalized nonviolence, and he became the real icon of this movement. And that's why, upon his death, I went directly to the floor and asked for unanimous consent to rename H.R. 4 the John R. Lewis Voter Education Act. And we did it. It would be a shame for us to honor him with a ship, as we just did over the weekend, to honor him with a likeness that the state of Georgia is going to send up here to the Capitol. All of that, and all John Lewis ever really wanted out of life was for people who look like him to have unfettered access to what makes this country what it is. And it would be a shame for us to go through all of these machinations and not pass the John R. Lewis Voter Registration and Education Act, Advancement Act. That's what we need to be doing. That's what John Lewis would want more than anything else. And I would hope that with everything else, we would do that. But see, I do remember that 6 months after that march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which was back in March 1965, the following August 6th, Lyndon Johnson signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And it was kind of interesting. Less than a year later, he was unceremoniously ousted out of SNCC. And so these kinds of things I'm used to. But I would hope that we are better body than that here in the Congress.
I want to thank you for coming on tonight, Congressman. I want to sort of put a pin in and say that the next time you come on, I would love to hear more at extended length about what that 1960 meeting of young James Clyburn and young John Lewis was like. So I'm going to have you back and we could talk about that, Congressman James Clyburn. Thank you very much.
I look forward to it. Thank you.